Good evening, family and friends. How y'all doing? It's been a minute. I've been whew, just kind of all over the place, just trying to focus, um, really get my thoughts together and all that good stuff. Um, and in doing that, I found myself really reflecting over a particular period in time. So, um, back in May, June, that time frame, I was really going through some things, and it just really brought me down. And I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know what was happening to me. It felt like I was slipping and falling, um, deeper and deeper into this depressive state. Um, every day, literally every day, I was sad, um, crying. I actually got to a point where I look forward to going home, to coming home, so that I can actually cry, so that I can get into my shower and just cry freely. Because I had been avoiding the tears all day at work. Sometimes they'll slip through, and then sometimes I'm able to stave them off and just kind of pull myself together. But I was looking forward to coming home and crying. That was my life. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. And one day, picked up my daughter, and she just kind of looked at me, and she's like, "Oh man, you're sad again." And it was just like, okay. It was an aha moment. Like, okay, something has to be done. Something got to be done. So I had to really delve into prayer. I reached out to my family, like, "Hey, pray for me. Don't ask why, just pray." Um, because I couldn't deal with what was happening. I was ready to let it all go, deal with whatever it is that was keeping me in that place. Um, so, in that, I prayed and asked God to release me from whatever it is. Help me to be free from whatever it was that was bringing me down and keeping me sad, keeping me depressed. And He took me to the book of Esther. Excuse me. Now, prior to that, I hadn't really had much exposure and encounter with the book of Esther, which is weird, because my grandmother's name is Esther and I love her dearly, dearly, but I had never really, really explored the book of Esther. And as I'm reading the book over this weekend, this period of about from Friday to Sunday, I spent the entire weekend reading that book, praying and crying. Reading, praying, and crying. And literally, that's my entire weekend. My entire weekend. And so by the time I get through the book of Esther, I'm sitting there kind of wondering, like, why God? Why did you lead me to this book? Why Esther? Because I can't quite make out what I'm supposed to get from this. Help me. Help me to understand. Help me to see. And so the first thing that kind of came up to me was about fasting. And unbeknownst to me, without even realizing it, I had fasted for that weekend because I didn't have an appetite. I was praying and crying and reading and then sleeping, of course. So it was a continuous cycle. But in that time, I hadn't eaten. And that seemed to be a pretty pivotal thing that happened in the book of Esther. And so that's what I took from it. Like, okay, so maybe I needed to fast and pray. Maybe that's the extent of it. And then I kind of left it alone. And I went to the Lifeway Christian bookstore here in town and saw that it's store closing. So why not? let me go in here and see what's in here for sale. Deeply discounted because I like my discounts. So I go into the store and I see all these study guides. And one particular study guide just kind of stood out to me, and it was Pathways, Lessons from Esther, From Providence to Purpose, and it's by Tony Evans. And I'm pretty sure you can't see that. But yeah, I was so happy to see this because it was confirmation to me that I really needed to go back into the book of Esther and really look at everything that's in that book that I needed. Because I didn't think it was limited to just fasting and praying. I knew it had to be more. I just hadn't gone back into it. So I started doing the lessons and reading through it. And one of the major facets of that particular book was the discussion on providence. And as Tony Evans defines it, it is defined as the way God works in the world. It refers to his invisible work in our lives, his unceasing involvement in the world. The belief that God stewards his creation in such a way that all creation ultimately fulfills his intended purpose. And then he goes on to talk about sovereignty, which refers to his rule over all his creation. Absolutely nothing escapes his power and influence. God is in charge of all things because he has created and sustained all things. He's in control. And what I started to realize is that, we start to grow when we understand God's providence and sovereignty. And the providence of God is the miraculous, mysterious way he intersects and interconnects events in order to bring about his sovereign rule of the universe. God's sovereignty is what he wants to happen, and his providence is the way he orders and connects events to bring about his will. And so that was so profound to me, because while I was in that period when God took me to the book of Esther, I kept asking, like, what is all of this for? Like, why am I feeling all of this? Why is my life in this place? Because I was having issues dealing with certain people in my life. I wasn't all that happy with my job at the time. It was just a lot of things just kind of coming together. And, I know that God's intentional. I know that he, works all things for my good, but I just couldn't understand, like, why are these things happening to me? Why? And I just, you hate to question God, but I like to know, I like to be in control, which is not the best thing because it's hard sometimes to put things in God's control, in God's hands, and allow him to do his work. Because sometimes, we manipulate or attempt to manipulate a situation in our favor when at the end of the day, like, God don't need your help. If he wants your help, he'll instruct and move you in a way that he needs you to be moved so that his will can be done. So I started to, think about the fact that I need to really pay attention to this. I need to learn how to let go and let God work. Even when it seems like nothing's happening, or you just can't understand why certain things are happening, you have to know that it's all a part of his plan. It's all a part of his will. It's all going to connect and come together at some point. Because sometimes he has to will for other people to do things and to get into certain positions and places in order for you to interconnect with them and intersect their path so that you can gain whatever it is that you're supposed to gain from that connection. Um, so, what I wanted to do, what I was inspired to do, was kind of go through the book of Esther and really look at um, some of the things that were happening that you know has to be about um, it's all about God doing the work, God uh, intervening and creating these situations and um, ordering situation in order for his will to be done. Because I found it interesting that that's the only book in the Bible where God is not explicitly mentioned. There's no real mention of God nor Jesus at all. Jesus, of course, because this is, Old Testament. But there's no mention of God at all. Um, and of course, that part I didn't understand at first when I initially started reading Esther. Like, how? Why? What is the. What am I really supposed to get from this, considering God isn't even mentioned anywhere in this book? So I went through the book of Esther. I think I've read this book probably about 6 to 8 times at this point, really trying to understand these points that had to be God's providence in play. It had to be God creating this situation. It had to be God that was behind the scenes, kind of manipulating certain things so that it would all come together and work for the good of his people. And so, y'all know I like to write stuff down in my little notebook. So I just want to go over some of these things. And as you hear them, like, really start to think about some things in your life that God did this for a reason. This had to happen in order for this to happen. And I promise you, it'll help you to really start to begin the process of trusting him, trusting the work, trusting his will, and understanding that it may not look like something is happening, but at some point, you'll get the knowledge, you'll get the understanding that, yep, that was God. God had to create that situation. God had to pull that person out of my life. God had to move me so that I would meet this person. Just all of those things. And hopefully it'll help you to really trust in his will for your life. That's one thing that I've definitely found to be beneficial in reading this book and really meditating on it and gaining some understanding on what it is, what it means. It's really putting me in a place where, God, I trust you. I trust you because I know that you had to do this thing because it's going to lead to something great. It's going to lead me to somewhere great. So I'm learning to trust him in everything, every way, every area of my life. All of it. All of it. Okay. So, first of all, this was in the time of King Xerxes. And he has this, his queen is Queen Vashti. I hope I'm saying that right. But so he was, having these banquets. He was partying or whatever. And on like the seventh day, I believe, he commanded the Queen Vashti, to come because he wanted to, have the people admire her royal beauty, because apparently she was a very beautiful queen. And he commanded that she come so that, she could be admired. But she refused. She refused. And that was a terrible offense at that time. But that was God's providence. That set some other things in motion. It led to some other things happening. So that had to happen. You know, she had to refuse because it ended up leading to the king's wise men advising him to issue a decree that Queen Vashti was to never again enter the presence of the king and to give her royal position to someone else. And it led to a search being made to find the king another beautiful queen. She had to be moved out of the way in order for there to be an opportunity for another queen to come into play, right? Okay. So now there was this guy, a Jew named Mordecai, and at the time he was taking care of his cousin's child, which was his cousin, but he's raising her as his own daughter because she didn't have any parents. And that led to her being taken to the king's palace, where she was ultimately selected to stay. And because of who she was and the kind of woman that she was, she won everyone's favor. You know, the king, just everyone she encountered loved her, absolutely loved her. And so Mordecai would kind of hang out around the court, around the palace, just to kind of see what's going on, see what's happening with Queen Esther. He had ordered her not to discuss her heritage, not to talk about the fact that she was Jewish. And she, of course, obeyed that and never, ever discussed the fact that, or who she really was. And so while Mordecai was kind of out there observing and walking around or whatever, he overheard a plot to assassinate King Xerxes. He then told the queen about that plot, and then she told the king, giving Mordecai ultimate credit for that information. That particular event led to the record of the plot being recorded into the book of the Annals, the King's Chronicles, which became something of importance as you go further into the story. So then the king honored and elevated Haman, which is one of his nobles. And he kind of elevated him to be the top noble, basically. And, you know, the king ordered that everybody respect him, give him ultimate respect, you know, that's my boy, right? But Mordecai didn't show him any respect. Not now, okay? Not now. And that kind of led to a really pivotal event because Haman was very upset. He was real upset about the fact that Mordecai was so disrespectful. He wouldn't bow down to him. And you know, when we get to certain places, we don't like to tolerate nobody disrespecting us and not, you know, basically, you know, I need you to bow down. I'm way up here now. I need you to bow down. Show me some respect. But he was a little upset because he would not do that. And that made him not only want to destroy Mordecai, but he wanted to destroy all the Jews. All of them, right? All of them. Which led to him going to the king and asking that he issue a decree to destroy the Jews. Basically telling him that, you know, there's these people out there in your kingdom. They don't follow your rules. They live a whole nother kind of life. Listen, it won't do you good. It's not in your best interest to let them stay, to keep them around. I think we should, you know, go and get rid of them. Let's do that. And so the king ultimately does issue a decree that on the 13th day of the 12th month, the Jews were to be destroyed. Okay, so Mordecai, of course, got wind of this. He heard about this decree because they took it everywhere in all the languages so that everyone knew that on the 13th day of the 12th month, let's kill all the Jews. Let's kill all the Jews. Okay. So Mordecai sent word by way of the king's eunuch of the plot to kill the Jews by decree of the king. And that led to Queen Esther telling Mordecai to go gather all the Jews and fast for 3 days. Don't eat anything, don't drink anything, just go fast. I'm going to do the same. And that seemed like a really, really good, that was a shift in the dynamic, because up to that point, it was Mordecai kind of directing Queen Esther into the things that she needed to do, things she needed to say, all of those things. So he was kind of in control. But at this point, you know, she kind of stepped into her queendom, you know? She stepped into her authority, and she's the one now directing the path, directing the activities. You know, you go do this. And then I'll go talk to the king. Because he hadn't called for her in about a month. And so it's kind of against the rules for her to just go talk to him when he has not called for her, right? So that's important. So they did fast for 3 days. And after that time, she went to the courtyard. And although she didn't have an invitation from the king, but because she had such favor with the king, he was pleased to see her. He was like, Queen, come on in here. What you need? Whatever you want, I got you. If you want half the kingdom, I'll give it to you. Just tell me what you want. And so she invited the king and Haman to a banquet that she wanted to throw for them. They obliged. They came, you know, they drank and, you know, had a good merry old time. King asked her again, what you want? If it's the, you know, half the kingdom, trust me, I'm going to give it to you. Just tell me what you want. So she said, you know what? Just come to another banquet tomorrow night, and then I'll tell you what I need. King said, all right, no problem. So, you know, Haman was high on his high horse, but he's still a little upset with the fact that Mordecai just real disrespectful. And he's just, you know, baffled by the fact that this Jewish man is disrespecting him like this. So he goes home, and his wife and some friends advised him to put up a poll and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on that pole. Just so happens that particular night the king couldn't sleep. Just so happens. You know that's God. You know that's God's providence at work. Absolutely. He couldn't sleep. So what did he do? He asked for his records, for the chronicles, to be read to him. All those things that happened, he just wanted to hear it. You know, read what was going on. And so that led to him reading about the plot to kill him that was reported by Mordecai. And so he heard somebody in the courtyard like, who that? Oh, that's Haman. So he said, Haman, you know, have him come in here for a second. So he asked Haman, who was out there, but he was coming to ask the king about impaling Mordecai, right? So that's why he was out there. But the king overheard him, told him to come on in. So he asked them, you know, what should be done for the man that the king delights to honor? because what he learned was that nothing had been done for Mordecai. He reported this plot to kill him. Turned out that the plot was real and true, and they stopped it from happening. But nobody honored Mordecai. No kind of benefit was given to him at all. So the king is like, hey, what was done? What did we do for him? And he's like, hey, nothing up to this point. So the king asked Haman, what should be done for a man that I want to delight, that I delight to honor? And so he tells him, you know what? Bring a royal robe that the king has worn, a horse that has the crest on its head and that the king has ridden, and entrust those things to the king's most noble prince. Let him robe the man and lead him down the streets proclaiming, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Right? So the king said, you know what? I like that, Haman. I like that. Do those things for Mordecai. Don't leave nothing out. Don't leave nothing out. Do all those things that you have recommended. Okay? So, of course, he did it. And created a situation where he had no opportunity to ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on this pole he done put up. Right? So now he can't do that. Because the king is feeling Mordecai now. And you would be going against the king, right? So he couldn't say nothing. So the queen holds the next, her next banquet, the one that she asked for the king and Haman to come to. And at that point is when she makes her request to the king. And she asked him to spare her life and the lives of her people. She also told the king that Haman was the enemy of her people. And you know, that kind of made the king a little bit upset. Like, what? Why? You know, why you gotta be that way, Haman? But that upset him. And so while he's upset, he's in this emotional state where he a little ticked off. One of his attendants come in and tells him that, you know, Haman had put this pole up outside his house, and the purpose of it was to impale Mordecai. And the king was like, word? Psh, you know what? Impale him on his own pole. So, yeah, don't be out there plotting against people, digging ditches for them, because please trust and believe that you'll be the one that stumbles and falls into it. Okay? Okay. Anywho, so, of course, Haman impaled on his own pole. The king ends up giving Queen Esther Haman's estate, and then Queen Esther ends up giving that estate to Mordecai. Then, of course, Queen Esther asked the king to write another order, kind of overruling that previous order to destroy all the Jews. That particular event led to the king issuing an edict that the Jews protect themselves and they can kill whoever tried to kill them. Okay? Yeah. So he turned it all around. Now the Jews have the upper hand, right? Because now they have the authorization, that authority to protect themselves, protect their homes, protect their people. God turned their sorrow into joy. He turned it around through those series of events. And ultimately, it all led up to Mordecai kind of rising in rank. So before, he was just kind of, milling around the palace, not really doing anything. And now he's second in rank to the king. You know what I'm saying? God created these events that not only elevated um, his his cousin that he's raising as his daughter, but he himself. Okay, she became a queen, and now he's second in rank to the king. He was also highly respected by his people, of course, because he worked for their good. And he spoke up for the welfare of everybody, not just himself. He wasn't looking at protecting and ensuring that his own life was saved or that just his family was saved, but that everybody was saved. And that was so profound to me to kind of go through and look at the interconnectedness of all of these events. One thing led to the next thing. All of these things had to happen in order for Esther to be made queen so that she would have the opportunity to stop these events from happening, because she'll have favor with the king. And it also allowed for Mordecai to show his allegiance to the king, because first he'd already talked about, reported the plot that saved the king's life. But yeah, all of these things had to happen. So I say all that to say, trust his will. Trust his will. It's perfect will. I promise you, it's his perfect will. Start to think about some of these things in your life and how they're connected, how that he's orchestrating, he's behind the scenes creating situations so that his will can be done. Just trust him. Just trust him. All right, good folks. I got to go pick up my baby from dance practice, but I really just wanted to take an opportunity to share that with you. And I pray that it blesses you like it blessed me, or continues to bless me, because I'm still going to go back and study it some more. I know there's more to it. I ask God to reveal things every time I read something. And so I know something else will be revealed. So, I may come back to this story at some point, but the book of Esther, read it. Let it bless you as it has blessed me. Love and blessings to everyone.